taking ownership, being accountable, and being responsible. I hate to say it, but I really think that's where we become an adult, right? And not like a child anymore, because this mentality of like, everyone's out to get me, right? Like my boss is terrible, like I don't make enough money. Whatever the mentality that you have is, it's an excuse to not really face the problem or the challenge, which is usually us, right? But at the end of the day, you have to take responsibility for the things that are going wrong just as much as the ones that are going right.
This is the Reframe Your Journey podcast, because we know you can go further and faster together. It doesn't have to be a guessing game. Each session, we'll be getting into advice and tactical tools centered around the 3 S's of strategy, systems, and long-term success. I'm Greg Ryder, entrepreneur, course creator, and coach. Let's dive in.
My guest this week became a very early retired surgeon who is now bringing his holistic approach of mind, body, and emotion to his high-performance coaching practice. Finding a renewed purpose in his own journey, Bryan is now making a massive impact both on and off the LinkedIn platform. A master storyteller, writer, and community builder. I'm excited for the gems to come in this one. Please welcome from San Antonio, Texas, Bryan Sagray. Bryan, welcome to the Reframe Your Journey podcast, where we are connecting with entrepreneurs and those carving out their own path from all over the globe, helping others. And we're here to share how you are doing it and what's going on with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for having me on, Greg. I'm looking forward to it and to sharing with your audience.
Yeah, me too. I'm pumped to get into a few things with you today. I will share a post or two to guide our conversation, and we'll see where it goes. So anybody listening on Spotify, Apple, there is a YouTube channel. You can head over, throw in Reframe Your Journey in YouTube. You'll find it, and you can see the visuals that we'll share today as we dig into it. So Bryan, why don't we get started? Maybe you can just share off the top here with the listeners. How long has it been since you hung up your surgical room gloves and have been diving into your own path here and into high performance coaching and helping others, find their purpose and live intentionally?
Yeah, I think the last year I was operating was 2019. So not quite 5 years. It's been about, a little over 4 years.
Nice. Does it feel like that has been retired, like it's settled, it's in the past and you're move on, or do you still think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I do miss, teaching the residents and the fellows and the medical students. Like I loved that. And then obviously like, helping the patients. So I do miss that teaching aspect. But I will tell you, like the calls in the middle of the night, the pager going off, I need more pain medication, right? I don't miss any of that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Now you have a different type of call. I'm sure you get calls like this, calls with clients, different Zoom calls through the day. Random question. Do you find that a fatigue to that? Do you manage your schedule pretty well, or do you have 5, 6, 7 Zoom calls a day and are like by the end of the day feeling it?
It's tough. Yeah. I mean, I do stick to a pretty strict schedule because it's amazing how I don't do as much physical work as I do now, right? Because when I was the attending and still operating, it's like you're on your feet, you're walking around the hospital. The hospital that I worked at was like a huge academic center. So like literally on the typical day, I would get well over, 15,000 steps. Plus I'm a runner. So then I still would run and it was very physically exhausting. But now, I stare at a screen for hours at a day. And I think even though I spent so much time like teaching as a professor, talking with patients and with students, I still feel like it's that blue light from the screen is it's so much more mentally fatiguing. I mean, of course, I'm a few years older now, but it's incredible how being on the screen for 5 hours versus being in person for 5 hours, this does me in a lot more.
Right. And would you consider yourself a more introverted side or extroverted? Is there because I've talked to a lot of introverts like myself who really find it draining, but what about yourself in that camp?
Yeah, I'm definitely an extrovert. And so I think for me, it's like as an extrovert, like I do need my alone time, like to recharge, but so much of my energy comes from like other people and from the environment. And so for me, yeah, being in person and being like in the classroom or being in the OR, it's like so much more energetic. When I'm behind the screen every day, I have to find ways like, personal ways, like in my own time to keep myself energetic, because it just, I don't get my fix without being physically around people.
Nice. Yeah, nature, people outside, off screen. You're doing so much on the LinkedIn platform. I've been loving your content on there, and a lot of the bridging from those connections to in real life and making sure we're doing that. You seem to be setting a great example of that networking with your time on there. I'm going to start now. I'll share one post of yours. Bryan, this one is, you were talking about sort of the responsibility and stopping the blame game. So it's a longer post, but basically you're summarizing up a quote about taking personal responsibility from Jim Rohn that really spoke to you, and that we can take charge of ourselves. It's something that we can control. And when you dig into it, this post, you're really talking about what excuses do, how responsibility matters, and tips on taking charge of it, like consistent learning, creating that accountability for yourself, focusing on the right things like solutions versus problems. And, to me, it's a big one. And this is, guys, anybody listening here, again, go to YouTube, check out the posts, or connect with Bryan on LinkedIn, because your posts, Bryan, have depth. We're not talking 2-3 sentences or 2-liners. Your posts have a lot of depth to them, and you set the stage and give solid examples. So why don't you talk us through a little bit about maybe that shift for you, or what you have seen in the past through clients or the work world about taking that personal accountability approach?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, for me, it's like, taking ownership, being accountable, and being responsible. I hate to say it, but I really think that's where we become an adult, right? And not like a child anymore, because this mentality of like, everyone's out to get me, right? Like my boss is terrible, like I don't make enough money. Whatever the mentality that you have is, it's an excuse to not really face the problem or the challenge, which is usually us, right? And so it's so much easier to play the blame game, to make an excuse, to write it off, right? It's so much easier to do that than it is to actually take ownership for it. I mean, I found in my own life that like literally 95% of the time or more, when I was doing that, it was really me. And it was just a way to get out of having to do the hard thing, or to learn something new, right? Or to just face the music, if you will. And so what I found was it was much harder for me to hold myself accountable at first. And I will say it's still much easier to have an accountability partner or a coach or a mentor, right? I mean, it really is. And the example that I give everyone is, if you and I want to go to the gym every day and we're going to work out together, unless you're in that small percentage of the population that is really self-motivated, if you and I say, hey, Greg, we're meeting at the gym at 5 o'clock, I am not going to let you down and you're not going to let me down. So we're going to be there. But if I'm just going to go to the gym every day at 5 o'clock myself, I'm probably going to miss a few days, right? Until you get that habit built.
Right.
And so that for me was where accountability just really changed the game for me, because it made me realize there's no one else to blame but me. Doesn't mean that I have to only hold myself accountable, right? I can have someone else help me, but at the end of the day, you have to take responsibility for the things that are going wrong just as much as the ones that are going right.
Yeah, absolutely. Great take on that. And there's a reason why some of the most successful course creators out there and stuff create the accountability pods and things as part of the system. When I launched a digital course a couple of years ago, I created a Canadian group. There was about 7 or 8 of us who were all trying to launch an online course, a digital course. And we just met every week, trying to keep the momentum going, helping each other, answer questions. And even with that, I think only 2 out of the 8 of us actually launched the course. So it's tough. And if you don't have that strong internal accountability ticker, then yeah, having a coach or somebody on your side definitely helps. Do you think
Super helpful.
let me ask, do you think that's a reason why it's almost easier to be successful in the workplace and harder at home, because you have that sort of built-in factor?
I do. Yeah. I think that's why, you've seen so much, I don't want to say division, but you have like these two camps of people where it's like everyone's pro remote work, right? And then all these other people are like anti remote work. And I think what actually is happening is that there's really two types of people in the world, right? There's those that are like self-motivated, and those that can really get themselves fired up no matter what the situation is, no matter how bored it is, no matter how engaging it is. They can just do it day in and day out, right? And then there's the people that they can do that, but really they need something else there, whether it's someone else, whether it's whatever it is, like you said, an accountability partner, whether it's just being in the physical workspace so that just the presence of other people there makes them not slack off, right? Like, it doesn't mean that one way is right or wrong. It's just catered and tailored to the way that person functions, right? And so that's why for me, when it comes to productivity, it's all about like that energy versus the time management. And that's what I've noticed with myself. Like, I definitely am a morning person. And so like after, and I think it was just maybe when I was an athlete and when I was a surgeon, like everything was skewed towards like 5 a.m. to 3 p.m. Right. And so it's funny, like a lot of people, their days just getting going around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. For me, it's like when you and I are done with this podcast, it'll be like 4 o'clock my time. I'm done for the day. Like I'm wiped out because I get up at 4:30 in the morning. It doesn't mean that everybody has to do that, but that's when I'm most productive. And so, yeah, I just think that, building your life, if you can, around that is key. And if it means you can work from home, great. And if you can't and you need to be in an office, then just learn which one you need and go to that place.
Nice. Yeah, learning how you best work and in which scenario, in which case makes a big difference, right? And I find the workplace is full of way more accolades. You have opportunities to grow typically in your career pathing and whatnot. Where at home, nobody's really giving you accolades for keeping your house clean, having a good conversation with your spouse, and cooking a nice dinner for that kind of stuff. So,
So true.
yeah. You know what? I was going to share another post, but let's just talk about it. Some of the content you're putting out there, it's clear from the other end that you care also about health. So it's like mind and body, how that works together to be optimal and get the best out of ourselves. It's both, so maybe you could share a little bit about what you see as a typical missing ingredient from that. So maybe we're mentally motivated and the mindset's there, but our health habits aren't following, so we fall short. But what are you seeing as a typical missing piece there?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is 100% like one of the things I focus on the most. I will tell you, hands down, there are two ways that you can really change your entire world. And that's, you can do it psychologically, which is with your mind, right? Or you can do it physiologically, which is with your body, right? And so I think what people forget is that nutrition and sleep, right? Like exercise, okay, that's a close, third, but nutrition and sleep are hands down the two best performance enhancing drugs on earth, period, right? They really are. And so I think just one example I can give people, not to be too scientific or get too technical, but your gut, right? Like your gut has 100 million neurons in your gut. Those are the same cells that are in your brain, right? And what people
Wow.
don't realize is that those neurons that are in your gut actually manufacture the majority of the neurotransmitters or the chemicals that help the nerves in your brain communicate. They're coming from your stomach. And so if you are eating sugary processed foods, if you're eating seed oils, if you're not following allergy restrictions that you may have, and you're causing all this inflammation, then it doesn't matter how fired up your mindset is, how much you've worked on overcoming limiting beliefs or all that. It's like putting 91 octane gas into a Formula One race car. It's not going to perform the way that it's supposed to. So that's why I think for me, with my coaching and just with the way I approach life, I tell people it's really holistic. It has to be physical, mental, and emotional. It's all of those things together, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it ties to the energy management, which you just referenced, because, for myself, I know my 30s, were very productivity focused, very much time management focused. I'm from the David Allen camps and getting things done and all these things. And as I approach my 40s, and now I'm, into my 40s, energy management is a thing.
Yeah,
It becomes very evident. And sleep, nutrition, like you said, those things really play a big factor in how well you can perform during the day.
for
So
sure.
I love that you bring the holistic approach. it's something that I've worked on. I had a crash and burn scenario before it opened my eyes at 37. So the body keeps score, whether you think you're doing okay, whether you think I can get by on 6 hours sleep, right? Like I used to live by that for so long. Six is enough, and then crash and burn. My dad passed away, like yours, at a younger age. That's another eye-opening event in our lives. I had a conversation with a friend last week who was a very strong person. You think of like, oh, this person's got it. Like they are dialed in, crashed and burned at 39, when, family members no longer needed them. So it's very important. Is there anything else, like you post about certain foods and things, any other thing on that topic before we move on around the body keeping score that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would just tell people it definitely is keeping score. And I'll tell you, no matter how diligent of a note taker you are, it's always going to remember better than you do. And so, one of the most important things you can do, again, this comes back to accountability, and I'll keep it brief. I just posted about this recently within the last couple of days, where in the last 2 weeks, had been going so ragged. I've been going up to the ranch, not to get too in the weeds, but LinkedIn impressions are terrible right now, right? So like inbound is horrible. So I've been outbounding a lot, having lots of phone calls, in the DMs, chatting. And so my wife, my best accountability partner I'd ever had, came to me again, and she's like, you're about to have, like, the tire's about to have a major blowout. And she called me on it, and I'm glad she did, because I realized, like, I was running really ragged, right? I was like right on the edge of out of control. And so I had to back off. It was like, I knew what I needed to do. I needed to get outside. And it's like, it can be one thing that you do, right? I tell people all the time, less is more. So if, like you said, what's one thing people can do right now to help restore that balance? I challenge people, like, for the rest of the week, right? The last couple of days of the week, 90 minutes before you go to bed, take your cell phone and just get rid of it. 90 minutes before you go to bed. If you have a smartwatch, take it off. And I'm telling you, do that for 3 or 4 days and tell me that you don't sleep better. That one thing, that's it.
That's such good advice. I'm trying to make a habit of going for a walk once a day without the phone, leaving it at home, take the dog for a walk, those types of things. Or like you said, putting it away much earlier. And I find the anxiousness that comes from that device
Yep.
just settles much earlier, right?
It does.
Yeah. Well, great piece there. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And this topic or question is I'm very interested on. It's more from the coaches out there. It seems like, and you go on LinkedIn, the community is amazing, but it feels like every other person is a coach right now in some way or form. Coaching has been a big part of my life, like you, sports, through my life, and then into business and mentoring others and having teams and things. But what I'm curious about is the content creation portion to coaching. It seems like now you have to be the content creator, because like any business, you need paying clients. You need people coming in the door. And to do that requires you to get your name out there, get your content, build the know, like, trust factor, which requires a lot of content, which double click under that requires a lot of time. So how are you handling the content creation game with all your posts, the depth of your posts? What do you like about it? What's the challenge in there? Maybe you can share on that, Bryan.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I mean, it is like a sea, right? Awash with just coaches for everything. And even though I will say, like, and I'll just be honest, because I'm super transparent, it is really, really frustrating. And it doesn't bother me from a comparison standpoint or from a standpoint of, like, where do I fit in? It bothers me because there's a lot of, certifications are great, right? Like, obviously for me as a surgeon, you want me to have certifications and letters after my name. The problem with coaching is, if you look at all the great coaches, right? Like some of the more modern, like the Ed Miletts and the Jay Shettys, and you look at some of the older ones like the Tony Robbins and the Jim Rohns and the Dale Carnegies, and these people, they have no certifications, right? I mean, their certification is wisdom and experience, which comes from living life, making mistakes, struggling, failing. And then they tend to coach people that go through the same type of stuff that they do, right? And so I think the big disconnect online is, like, you're like, where is the experience coming from, right? I see these TikTok coaches, that's no offense to anybody, but they're like 19 years old and they're like they're advertising themselves as like a C-level executive coach. I'm like, really? At 19 years old? Okay, incredible. But like, what experience are you drawing on, right? Like, guaranteed there's no experience there. And so I think that makes it really difficult to set yourself apart, because they might be an incredible writer and an incredible creator and get a lot of eyeballs. So how do you stand out? So for me, it's exactly what you said. I try to write content that really makes people think. It's really deep, but also I'm sharing stuff that's really vulnerable. And frankly, like, I pull the curtain back almost every day. I mean, most of the content that I post is something that I did wrong or something that I was doing wrong, right? And like, how did I fix it, right? And then I'll post like testimonials and stuff like that, or like maybe every now and then I'll post something funny about my dog. But what I really try to do is, show people that we're all the same. We all make the same mistakes. But like, if you fit into this category, right? If you're this high performer that has a lot of success but still has no fulfillment, like, hello, I've been there, and you're not alone. So So to answer your point, I know it's really long-winded, but I think that if you are a coach right now, content creation is so key. And the one tip I would give anybody that's looking to get into that game is think about whatever platform you're posting on as a public journal. That's how I think about it. And post content that's for yourself. Pull the curtain back, be vulnerable, share something, raw, that's totally unfiltered, and just watch what happens, right? People they're going to resonate with that more than the content that's like, I made 7 figures in 32 seconds and I cold plunge for 25 hours a day, right? Like, nobody resonates with that.
Right. Yeah. Great point. Finding that mix. Like I said, the know, like, and trust, it requires a mix of content. People got to know that you know what you're talking about, but they need to needs to be relatable. And the trust is when you are vulnerable, like you said. I find those ones will get a lot of engagement. There's always this battle, right, Bryan, between like this type of post, higher engagement, this type of post, low engagement, but a client or 2 or 3,
Yep.
So it's always an interesting take. When you dig in, like, is a majority of your time writing out hooks, writing out, where's the majority of your time sort of come from in that process?
This is great. This is a really good question. I would tell you, and again, it's going to sound really, really easy and corny. The best content that you'll ever get, and the best way to get clients, is to literally live your life, right? So it's like, when I write a post, what takes me the longest time is whatever backstory there was there. So like, I'll get my phone out. I talk about this sometimes, and I'll just scroll through my phone and I'll find a photo, and it'll make me think about like, oh my gosh, I remember that exact moment, right? That was like, I took that selfie with my wife and I because, I had just done something. Like, I did a post the other day that went incredibly well because we were out on the trail, literally together, me and my wife, hiking with the dog. You might have seen this. And I literally was on my phone while we were hiking, and I stepped on a rock covered with ice and just totally bit it, right? It was hilarious. Like, I didn't get hurt. And then I wrote a post about like falling down on your butt because you're not being present in the moment. And so for me, it's like, yes, the posts take time to write. I will tell you, like, the hook is really important, right? Because nowadays we're like an attention-based society, but you have to hook them, and then you have to keep them, though. It's not enough to just, have the thumbnail and hook them, and then if they get off the line, then they're gone, right? Because what LinkedIn looks at least I know, is they don't just look at the person that clicks like see more. They look at like, what's the dwell time on the post too. And so what's happening is, if you keep that person hooked on the post longer, then it tells LinkedIn's algorithm that post is high value, and then they put more eyes on it. So it's not just enough to get the person to click see more. They need to like be on that post and not just click see more and then scroll right past it. So the key is to hook them and then to keep their attention.
Interesting. So for my understanding, does that also work in the engagement side of things? So like, if they're down in the comments and commenting and stuff, does that length of time still have an impact there?
Yeah, that dwell time is like super important. So like, if someone's just dropping into your post and they're like, great share, and then they move on, versus like if you read one of my posts and you like put, 2 or 3 sentences there, I mean, that's benefiting me, but then also you, because then your audience is going to see this great comment you left on my post, which brings your audience over to me and then takes my people over to you, right? So it's like all about that reciprocal thing. So that's why it's like, yeah, it's there's a lot of intentionality that goes into it, but I will tell you the key is to write about what you actually are living, right? Like that's the key for easy content. It's not going to make it necessarily easy to learn to write in a way that's readable and skimmable and looks pretty. All that takes time. But the idea of where do you get the content from, it comes from all of this. Everything that we do off of the screen, that's where it comes from.
Nice. That's something that I think, you just got to have a process, right, Bryan, to capture these things as they come up, I guess. And then, I'd love to dive into one more thing. I'm going to share a graphic here because as I'm thinking through this process, I'm thinking about buckets here. I'm thinking about energy levels and, where, how we find that balance in time, because that sounds like a lot of time to me. Like when we're thinking about how to balance being present, creating content, posting, engaging in comments, and everything of that sort. So let's start us off, and then I'm going to bring up a graphic here. And
this is great. So when you want to think about, okay, we talked about where the idea comes from. Now, how do you actually execute and take action, right? Because as you know, I talk about it all the time, less talking and planning, more doing. And so once you get the idea and once you have it, now how do you execute on it? Yeah. Here's what I would tell you to do. I do think that the majority of people that are going to be long-term successful content creators probably batch create content, meaning like I have a set time every day where, okay, so I constantly have like a journal with me, or I'm taking voice memos, like if an idea hits me, but I very rarely will write the post like right in that moment, just because I'm on calls with you, I'm on calls with clients, I'm out at the ranch hunting or whatever, right? Like I can't just stop everything I'm doing and write a post right then. So I would tell most people, pick 90 minutes, maybe once or twice a week. And in that 90-minute period, maybe write 2 or 3 posts, right? Or whatever. And then have a system for yourself so that when you post and you hit that publish button, maybe you spend 30 minutes responding to comments, right? And going and commenting on other people's stuff during that period or whatever. And then cut yourself off, right? Like the post, I will tell you, some of the most viral posts that I've ever had, I mean, I made a post one time. I hadn't engaged on LinkedIn like all day. I didn't engage the rest of the day. I just wrote this post and then I went and got in the deer blind where I didn't have any reception. And I got out like 8 hours later and it was like thousands of people. This thing had just blown up. And I was like, what in the heck? Then I have posts that I spend like 4 hours writing and I'm commenting like a wizard. And the post is like, you know what I mean? It like tanks. And so,
wow.
So that's why I would tell people, like, have a system like anything else in your life and stick to it, right? And then, and then experiment, right? Like that's the other key. Like if stuff stops working, don't blame anybody else. Like we talked about at the beginning, take ownership and blame yourself, right? Maybe the algorithm and everyone's bored with what you're writing about because you've written about the same thing for the last 6 months, right? So write about something different, change the format of your post, stop using photos in every post, like experiment, right?
Nice. It sounds like we come from a similar camp on time blocking. So that's where I was going to try and share like a concept here with you is like when people come and ask about balance, and we have a little graphic here and we think about time blocking, how do you find that balance between you got your priorities under family, maybe, hobbies, career, health. There's, people talk about as you become an adult, it's like, well, you can only pick 3 or pick 2 or pick 5. It's so hard to have so many buckets, but how do you keep them full? Bryan, do you come from a camp where it's like, okay, my 30 to 60 days may be really focused, in these 2 buckets, and these ones may suffer a bit, but then I'll switch gears and I communicate that the others, like this is coming back. Like you mentioned your wife flagging, hey, Bryan, I see this happening. So then you have to kind of shuffle this and maybe start, okay, my next 30 days, I need to top this one back up. Like, what are you thinking there?
I mean, for sure. I think people, again, it's people being realistic. or saying what they want other people to hear, right? It's like these glorious morning routines that you hear about. Okay, no one is doing that every day, right? Like pick one or two non-negotiables, pick a couple of things
Yeah.
and do those things every day, no matter what. But then the rest of the stuff, it's like, I always think about Atomic Habits and James Clear. I think the biggest takeaway from that book, if you've never read it, and this applies to everything in life, is in life, you will fall to the level of your habits and your systems and your routines, period. I did a post about that the other day. I think about it as like bowling with the bumpers up. Okay. So it's like if you build this safety net underneath you, right? And you're like that high wire walker with the safety net. Okay. If you have this safety net there and your business is doing really well and the inbound is coming and the clients are signing, lean into that. Why wouldn't you? Right? Let something else slip a little bit, but you have the safety net to catch you and have someone to hold you accountable. And then if your business slows down, focus on your health, focus, maybe read another book, right? So you have to learn that these things are in flux at all times. But the key is to have that safety net built so that not a single one of them catastrophically fails. That's the key, right? They can wax and they can wane, but don't let either one of those buckets have the bottom just blow out of it. That's where you really will end up burnt out.
Love it. So I'm hearing that that's the true balancing act, right? Is keeping those buckets. I think there's an expectation mishap where we think we can keep all of them 80 and above, sort of 80 to 100% full, and then we get frustrated when they're all sitting 60% and we're trying to do everything, sort of thing,
Correct.
Nice. Yeah, and I think it does help going into your time blocks, knowing what the priority is, right? Often I get asked about time blocking and it's like, well, I get there and people are spending their time sorting these priorities in their block versus coming into the block, knowing exactly what they're going to do with that 90 minutes that you talk about.
Yes, for sure. That's why another thing that is another super impactful thing that people can do right now to make a huge difference is I tell them, it's this old method called the Ivy Lee method, but basically at the end of your day, every day, not at the beginning of your day, at the end of your work day, that's when you make your to-do list of the 5 things or whatever that you're going to do the next day. That way, when you wake up in the morning and you start that first block, you just attack that first block, right? So, and then it's a good end to your day. That's when my cell phone and my laptop close. And so I encourage people, I challenge you to end your day by planning the beginning of your next day. Don't do that in the morning the following day. Be ready to go when you wake up in the morning, right? Like the race car doesn't show up to the starting line with the engine not in it. It shows up to the starting line ready to race, right? So wake up in the morning with everything ready to go.
Yes. And I'm with you in that camp of reducing, decision fatigue day to day, right? That's one of those, a great example of don't wake up and try to make 5 decisions in the morning. Right.
No, I'm trying to figure out what kind of coffee I want, not what I'm going to do for the first 90-minute work block,
Gotcha. Yeah, very much aligned. So, thanks for these insights. I'd love to hear, what do you have in the works? What's keeping you fired up these days and keeping you going? You have something in the works coming out.
Yes.
Maybe you can share with us what's going on in the next, 60, 90 days of Bryan's World.
I do have something really cool I'm excited about. I won't tell you who it's going to be with, but the main focus of my business is still going to be one-on-one coaching because I really think that for me is just the most impactful way to do it. But I got a lot of great feedback, from the first 10 months of what I've been doing. And I'm going to be working with actually someone who was one of my clients, and we're going to be launching a cohort that's going to be much more feasible for a lot of other people. It'll be able to allow us to work with other people because it'll be a lower ticket offer. And what it's going to do is it's an accountability type system where everyone that is in this cohort is going to be learning from each other's experiences. And it's going to be focused on those 3 pillars, right? So physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And I'm just super excited about it because it's going to be able to really allow people to, more people to have access to what we've been working on. So
nice. That form of community and support, we all need it.
yep.
It's the reason why I'm starting to hit record on these types of conversations to share. So thank you, Bryan, for sharing today and joining today, these insights. All the best of luck with the cohort. Again, guys, jump on LinkedIn, connect with Bryan, follow the content. I'm sure he'll post more about the cohort and what's to come. So look forward to learning more about that, Bryan.
I appreciate it, Greg. Thank you very much.
Thanks for jumping on today.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to check the show notes for a recap of the lessons so you can reference them as you look to apply them to your journey. Please be sure to subscribe, give it a like, and a comment. It is very much appreciated. Have a great day, a great week, and let's go and grow.